Ladies and gentlemen, could you welcome to stage Dave Ward?
Once upon a time, a very inspiring and a very wise thought leader shared with a group of people some very insightful words that every time we use jargon, we disconnect and isolate people. Now you may think I've put those words up there because as a futurist I predicted what Rao was about to share. If only I had, because the topic I'm talking to you about tonight is disruption, which is jargon. I wanted to help you disrupt your thinking, but I can't do that. So unfortunately I'm going to have to pivot, and ladies and gentlemen, Simon Dowling! Okay, well, here's the thing. Disruption was so yesterday. True story, this morning I reframed and retitled and shifted the content of my presentation. But I know I can't disappoint you because it has to relate. So what I'm here to talk to you about is the idea of being future ready. I'm going to help you gain new capabilities for the future of work, and we're going to do it over the next 20 minutes, so let's not hang around. Because as you know, the world is incredibly fast moving. Right now, as you're sitting in this room slowly, people out there are changing and disrupting everything around you. Or so futurists have led you to believe. But here's the reality. The world does not change quickly. Have you ever tried to develop new technology? New programs, new ways of working? Did it happen overnight? Or was it an overnight success 10 years in the making? Because what's even slower to change than technology? People, you know the answer. I predicted you'd know the answer, by the way. Now, if you want to understand any phenomenon, pull your brain out of society and look at nature. So when I thought about disruption, what gets disrupted? Water. So if you're just staring at one spot on the water, looking nowhere else, disruption appears to be fast moving because it came out of nowhere. But if you've ever skipped a stone, were you a genius on your first try? Did you do 13 bounces? Or was it like developing technology? You were practicing over and over, so all you had to do was turn your head to see what's coming. Now, I said I was going to disrupt your thinking because right now you're probably sitting there going, yes, all those people out there aren't looking at what's coming, but I am. So we're going to run a bit of a brain experiment and just observe your own thought patterns and see what you predicted coming. Because here's how the future works. You're in a business meeting. Someone puts up a chart. One of those bars represents your team and the number of sales or the amount of profit. Which bar are you hoping is yours? You've been programmed to really like where history repeats. What's proven to work keeps working. But where does change begin? It's on the edges. So we're going to have a look at the edges today. Because the world isn't changing too quickly. What's changing is you and me, and we're doing it too slowly. I didn't even know if I could be bothered waiting for that entire thing to zoom forward, but I decided I would. Now, if you're not familiar with the fourth industrial revolution, you need to be. Because how many people here spend most of your working day on a farm? Have a look around. Okay, how many of you spend most of your working day in a factory? You think about if your family had been working on a farm and society shifted on you and you hadn't seen it and they got moved to a factory. Is that significant change that you should have seen coming? How many of you work in some sort of office building, whether it's a home office or moving from meeting room to meeting room in other office buildings? Can we go hands? Oh, look at that. There are a few hands up on that one. So let's have a look at where are you heading to next, because this is the fourth industrial revolution that's already playing out. By the way, if you're hearing presentations about the future is digital, the future's not digital. It began in 1969, which interestingly enough is my birth year. So you have to say what's coming next. Now I know there are a few people in here who work with teams in rooms. Does anyone use post-it notes and flip charts? When were they invented? 1977. I also use post-it notes and flip charts, but I've just started experimenting with a new way. So how many people, and if I can get a clear show of hands so we can see the shift happening, are using post-it notes but wrapping a private social network around them live while you're working, whether it's Slack, whether it's Yammer, whether it's Microsoft Teams? Hands clearly up. So that's the future happening around you. If your hand wasn't up, that's the next play. If you use email at all, which is older, email or the lava lamp? Both invented at the same time. Now, why on earth would you use a private social network? Because we should be talking to other people. But you move between the two worlds. This is called mixed reality. Here you have a team, someone in New Zealand, putting post-it notes up, taking a photo, and someone in Australia going, wow, I liked those same things. Here you have me taking a photo of the team, which includes the CEO, modelling the behaviour I want other people to see. There are different ways of connecting. Now have a look at this. This is 2 years old, but there's a short documentary from Microsoft. I don't have to talk for the rest of the time. I'm just going to play this video. Now I'll play a couple of minutes of it that gives you a sense of this shift that's called the responsive organisation.
One of the big dynamic shifts between the old sort of 20th century model and the 21st century model is this idea of predictability versus uncertainty. In the old model, things didn't change very fast, it was predictable, and so you built for predictability. It was like saying, go find this object in a well-lit room. New model is dark room. Who knows where the object is? And how do you behave, how do you operate in that uncertainty? Smaller moves, more frequent, more communication, more letting people know where you stand. That's the idea. So there's sort of this acceptance, this tacit acceptance of uncertainty in a responsive organization that says, not only is it complex, but it's unknowable.
Things are faster, but they're also more interconnected. So what happens in a far-off location in an area that otherwise wouldn't affect you now is connected. And when you combine the two, speed and interconnectedness, suddenly you have this unpredictability. So you don't know what tomorrow will be like. You don't know what next week, and you certainly don't know what next year is like.
We have inherited, most companies have inherited systems that were built on the paradigm of the Industrial Revolution, that were responding to the industrial forces that were shaping society in those days, and that were changing, obviously, the worker from a factory worker to a white-collar worker, an office worker. These systems no longer work.
There's been one real central core priority for all companies for as long as we can remember, and that's efficiency. In a world of information scarcity, you knew what you had to do, the products and services you were going to provide, and the goal was to do them as efficiently as possible, as big a scale as possible. Well, today we really feel that incongruence because in a world of information abundance, we get instant feedback on everything we do.
And so you've got to have adaptability to respond to changing conditions so organically. It has to be in the DNA of the organization so that it doesn't have to come from top-down directives that says, now we are going to produce a new version of this. Instead, it allows the organization to learn and adjust or adapt automatically.
You have to be able to adapt automatically. It has to be in the DNA of the organisation. You're probably thinking, yeah, well, I'm into Agile. I know how to respond. I know how to react. My brain. Experiment number 1. Does your brain expect a speaker to be on stage? How long have we been doing that? Now have a look at the crowd. How many people are turning around? Hardly any. Because why? You're not Agile. Now how many people are saying, I'm not going to turn around now? Those are the people in the organisations that hold things back. So just embrace that feeling, feel uncomfortable, disrupt yourself, disrupt the people next to you, and turn around. Because that's what you need to lead other people to do. Now we got to keep on moving into the future. Group of smart people in the room. So you probably know this study from the World Economic Forum, and hopefully you've had a look at where their data came from. Because don't just take things at face value, but let's take it at face value. So these are the 10 skills you need to move into the future. Notice anything about the dates? Where's that skipping stone? We're in the middle of them. That shift has already happened. So what I want you to do now, we need agility of your mind. Spot the 2 new skills that we need in 2020, and once you've spotted them, stand. How fast are you responding? Stand. Or are you still holding the organisation back while you try and analyse? Okay, what are those 2 new skills? Shout them out. Okay, now here's where things get really interesting. What is the fastest rising skill? Here's the deep irony. How creative was that answer the room just gave me? Or did you logically analyse the data and tell me the fastest moving skill? Give me a creative answer. Fish. I love it. So fish is the fastest moving skill. See how creativity works? Let's keep pushing forward. Okay. What I want to leave you with at the end of this talk is a new mindset. But here's the hilarious thing. When I was putting this slide together about an hour ago, I noticed the word mindset. It's the wrong word. It should be mind flex. The word leap. That's all you have to remember. It gives you 4 different modes to flex your mind into. If you want to see the future, the first thing is you need to have a more progressive mindset than anyone else. The second thing, though, is that you have to push your thinking upwards. Has anyone right now got their head in the clouds? Sometimes. Yeah, at the back, there was a hand. What are you thinking about?
Oh, I was thinking I like to imagine things.
Right, so you just kind of let your mind wander. Your organisation has trained you shouldn't have your head in the clouds, but who changes the world? The dreamers, the imaginers. But the problem with the world is there are way too many post-it notes on walls with people doing nothing with them. So the other mode is a far more active way of thinking. So we're going to focus this evening on progressive thinking. To see the future, to think like a futurist, you just need to explore the edges of the present. So let's do that. London to Dubai in 29 minutes. New York to Paris in 30. Delhi to San Francisco in 40 within the next decade. Do you think that is fact or fiction, or what I like to call factish? Which means you think it's possible, you're not quite sure, but you know some facts, right? You can see that skipping stone trajectory. Have a conversation and decide your answer. Go for it. Do you think I'm really getting you to work on the question? Don't you know by now this is a social experiment? What was I looking for? What was my instruction to you? What did I say to do to solve that? Have a conversation. Are people the only things you can talk to? What did I see no one doing? Who could give you a better answer? So last night I asked Siri, it could have been Cortana, it could have been Google Home Mini. I said, who can fly from London to Dubai in 29 minutes? And Raoul had already given you the answer. SpaceX. Now who runs SpaceX? Look what happened. You just went for the obvious. Did you go to the edges? Because Elon founded and leads, but he doesn't run it. So your human brain is still really important to be curious, but to ask the right questions. So grab a device and ask it the right question to find out who runs SpaceX. Go for it. Yeah, and it would have been nice if that was the answer. Well, what kind of person runs an organisation? What might their title be? CEO leads it. Who runs it? Chief Operations Officer. So if you explore the edges and you ask a device, who is the Chief Operations Officer of SpaceX? You will discover Gwynne Shotwell. Everyone in here knew Elon Musk. Who knew Gwynne Shotwell? This is how you get a competitive advantage. There was at least one hand that went up, but it was very, very small number. But Gwynne is creating the future. Have a listen to this. This is from 2 months ago. And she was employee number 7 at SpaceX. She is President and Chief Operations Officer.
But instead of spending $1 billion on a brand new engine, we put 9 of them together on the back end of Falcon 9. Residual capability. Glue 3 Falcon 9s together and you have the largest operational rocket flying. And so it was expensive to do, but it was a much more efficient path than starting from scratch.
And the BFR is the equivalent of how much bigger than that in terms of just power?
BFR is about 2.5 times the size of this.
Right. And so that allows you, I mean, I still don't really believe this video that we're about to play here. What on earth is this?
So it currently is on Earth, but this is basically space travel for Earthlings. I can't wait for this residual capability. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to fly BFR like an aircraft and do point-to-point travel on Earth. So you can take off from New York City or Vancouver and fly halfway across the globe. You'll be on the BFR for roughly half an hour or 40 minutes. And the longest part of that, yeah, it's so awesome. The longest part of that flight is actually the boat out and back.
I mean, Gwen, come on, this is awesome, but it's crazy, right? Like, this is never going to actually happen.
Oh no, it's definitely going to happen. This is definitely going to happen.
How? Like, what? I mean, so first of all, countries are going to accept this incoming missile that's landing on, you know.
So, Chris, can you imagine us trying to convince a federal range, Air Force bases, to take the incomers? Because we're doing it now regularly, right? We're bringing the first stages back, and we're landing them on federal property on an Air Force base. So I think doing it, I don't know, 10 kilometers out from a city, maybe it's only 5 kilometers out from a city.
How many passengers can possibly afford the fortune of flying by space?
So the first ship, the first BFR, is going to have roughly 100 passengers. And let's talk a little bit about the business. Everyone thinks rockets are really expensive, and to a large degree they are, and how could we possibly compete with airline tickets here? But if you think about it, if I can do this trip in half an hour to an hour, I can do dozens of these a day, right? And yet a long-haul aircraft can only make one of those flights a day. So even if my rocket was slightly more expensive and the fuel is a little bit more expensive, I can run 10x at least what they're running in a day and really make the revenue that I need to out of that system.
So you really believe this is going to be deployed at some point in our amazing future? When? When do you...
Within a decade, for sure.
And this is Gwyn time or Elon time?
That's Gwyn time. I'm sure Elon will want us to go faster.
That's okay. That's certainly amazing.
So see Chris's brain, who's surrounded by the world's smartest people, grappling with it just as your mind was. But see the transition your mind started to go through as you explored it in more detail. But this isn't about Earth-to-Earth travel. This is about your industry. What are you not looking at? What are you dismissing out of hand because you haven't explored it to watch? Is that stone skipping, or is it sunk partway along the way? So I thought I'd bring a little bit closer to home when we just talk about leverage thinking. So as a futurist, you have to look forward, but you have to make great use of the past, more use than most people do. So I'll give you an example. This is a study tour through IBM Watson I did about 4 years ago. This is a doctor working with a computer to diagnose. Because you think, can a doctor go home at the end of a day and read every single new medical study that came out? It's just physically impossible. Yet are you comfortable that your doctor is not working with the latest information? That's just wrong, so we have to solve that. But that was 4 years ago. Beginning of this year, my 17-year-old son Max spent $75 of his own hard-earned money to buy a Google Home Mini. True story. He walked down one morning and he said, "Dad, I've got a bit of an eye infection." I was like, awesome, I'm going to step up with my fatherly wisdom and tell him what he needs to do. He said, "Oh no, Dad, I was just letting you know, I've already asked Google and here's what I should do." And the advice was way better than anything I could have given. How could it not be? But do not think that meant he typed into a keyboard on Google, and do not think it meant he used a mobile phone. He just said, "Hey Google, I've got an eye infection, what should I do?" You think about your data, your information, have you structured it for voice? Because you are competing, not against chatbots, but artificial intelligence coaches. Have you been taking a look at that? Have you been tracking that? Or are you doing the rocket thing and just dismissing it, going, "Oh yes, but I'm a human being, it could never do what I do"? Just look at some of the repetitive phrases you use over and over. There are some things that only you can do, but there are other things that are being replaced. Who in the room uses Headspace for a guided meditation. Have a look at that. The change begins in other areas and shifts across. But that was so last year. So I want to go back just 2 months ago when Sundar Pichai, Google's CEO, stood on stage to show the new Google Assistant technology they are just in the process of releasing. Have a look at Google Duplex.
As I said earlier, our vision for our assistant is to help you get things done. It turns out a big part of getting things done is making a phone call. You may want to get an oil change schedule, maybe call a plumber in the middle of the week, or even schedule a haircut appointment. You know, we are working hard to help users through those moments. We want to connect users to businesses in a good way. Businesses actually rely a lot on this, but even in the US, 60% of small businesses don't have an online booking system set up. We think AI can help with this problem. So let's go back to this example. Let's say you want to ask Google to make you a haircut appointment on Tuesday between 10 and noon. What happens is the Google Assistant makes the call seamlessly in the background for you. So what you're going to hear is the Google Assistant actually calling a real salon to schedule the appointment for you. Let's listen.
So how can I help you? Hi, I'm calling to book a women's haircut for a client. I'm looking for something on May 3rd. Sure, give me 1 second.
Did you see that? That's not about efficiency, that's not about responsiveness. So if you say the thing that I've got as a human is empathy, have you ever met another human being that struck you as not being particularly empathetic? Don't think it's not a programmable skill. Now I want to close out by talking about agility. So as I came off stage, I went over to the side and I just negotiated with Matt for a bonus 5 minutes. Which I think is kind of fair because I let Gwyn into the room, I let Sundar into the room, I let Google Assistant in the room, and they took up some of my valuable time. But the last part belongs to you. Because what I want to do is do some expansive thinking. I want to push our minds into the clouds. Because as human beings, we pride ourselves in our intelligence. But the world has shifted. We're now slightly concerned about artificial intelligence. How do we compete against it? Well, if you try and think only with your brain, as we've seen this morning, you cannot compete. What you actually have to do is don't think AI means artificial intelligence. AI stands for augmented intelligence. It's not people versus machines, it's people with machines. And by doing that, you're able to think beyond your brain. And that gives us all collectively as a group what I like to call superhuman intelligence. And so I wanted to let one final person into the room, but I had 4 people who I thought I really want them to share. It's wrong for me to decide what you need to hear. So you're going to decide, and you're going to use your feet to do it. So you're going to stand, it's going to be agile and disruptive, and you're going to move into a corner. So if you would like to hear from Indra Nui, who led PepsiCo and shifted into a more natural world in her style of connecting more deeply with people than any of us ever had, you would head into that corner there. If you want to hear from Travis Kalanick, everyone used to go, we want to have an Uber-like strategy, but they never looked behind the scenes to go who was leading it. Travis and this challenging style of innovation, you will head into that corner over there. If you want to hear from Satya Nadella, who had to shift a culture of 100,000 people at Microsoft to be more open and agile, you will head into that corner there. And our final choice we will be voting for is Ginny Rometty, who not only leads IBM, she is an engineer, so she understands artificial intelligence from both a business and a technical perspective. Let's move. You have 30 seconds. Make your choice. And as you move, chat to other people about where are you heading and why are you heading there. Find a little bit of movement. Don't let other people influence you. The beauty of this is I did not know how it would go and I did not know the answer would be so obvious. Which leader are we going to hear from? Which is the winning one? Pepsi. Have I taught you nothing? See how difficult cultural change is? This is where the most people are. This is the most predictable. This is what we know. You have to look at the edges. The thing about the edges is they are either crazy or brilliant. In this case, I think you got lucky. We're about to do brilliant. Now, in order to present this, and this is the closing talker, my frustration with PowerPoint and Keynote and Prezi is everything's really linear. When you try and interact with an audience, you're constrained to go, yeah, nice choice. Anyway, what I had in mind, click next slide. So my father, and I'm really hoping, yep, my father is a retired web developer. See the age we're in? There are such things as retired web developers. Never have a son who's a futurist if you're planning to retire, because I told him my frustration. We said, let's build a new presentation system in a browser. So all my content sits in OneNote, it gets sucked into a browser, and it's all alphabeticized. But even better, this is a superhuman intelligence system. I can flick it out, and if you start talking, for example, about design thinking, I just switch the brain pattern, and the content reorders. So, if we wanted to flip to Indra Nui, if she had have won, I can go there and Indra's into the room. But as we know, unfortunately, just in this particular time, Indra did not win. Now, it's difficult to spot the difference between crazy and brilliant. The closing thought I want to leave you about this clip I'm going to show you, Travis Kalanick is no longer CEO of Uber. He was a hard-charging, brilliant innovator. They went up against Didi Chuxing in China, and in that region, Jean Liu, president of Didi Chuxing with a whole different style of leadership, won. But this ability to challenge at the edges is critical to the growth Uber and other companies have had. So let's hear from Travis. By the way, he's being interviewed by the editor of Vanity Fair, who is incredibly smart. Graydon Carter will ask some questions. At a certain point, you will find yourself laughing at Graydon. But he's only asking the questions that any of us would have asked. So in effect, you're laughing at yourself, but that's okay.
The brilliance about Uber was, and it was brilliant, is not having the cars. But by doing driverless cars, aren't you going into the car business in a certain way?
Who says we're going to own all of them?
So what, the Uber drivers who drive now will have that little thing on top? And
well, I think there's all kinds of implementations, whether it be folks who own fleets. The drivers might even own cars that then get converted to being driverless, and they make an income off of it or a revenue of some kind. And it's possible we could own them. I think there's a lot of different models for how this is going to work, and I don't think anybody has a clear sort of definitive idea of exactly how it's going to go. But when you talk about when that transition happens, let's say that transition happens over 10 or 15 years, you're talking about replacing 80 million cars in the US, 100 million cars, something like that. I mean, it's going to be a huge, huge number of vehicles that when you multiply by 20,000 or 30,000 or $40,000 per vehicle, you're literally talking about hundreds of billions of dollars a year.
okay, you're zipping down the highway at 60 miles an hour, and the grid goes out. What happens then?
The cars will be able to drive, like they'll just be able to drive.
But what happens if you're sitting in the back seat?
Yes.
And the steering wheel's in the front seat?
Well, who says there's going to be a steering wheel?
Well, you got to control it if the grid goes down.
Well, no, what grid are you talking about?
The electrical. Okay, the electrical grid.
Old school on me. What is this?
So as you leave tonight and put this into action, 3 things to do. Number 1, explore the edges more. Number 2, reprogram your brain. And number 3, think like a superhuman. Thank you very much for being superhumans tonight, and go create the future.